The first time the heart monitor spiked, everyone assumed it was shock. Grief does that, bends the body into old reflexes even when the mind insists the past is sealed. But when Liesl Albrecht lifted her eyes and met the steady blue gaze she had mourned, denial burned off like fog. Nathan, her Nathan, stood in the corridor outside the recovery suite, the fluorescent light flattening his features into a shape memory knew by muscle and scent and the ache behind her sternum. She whispered something in a language she hadn't spoken since childhood, a half-prayer, half-curse to ward off devils, and then the world went white. She fainted not because she is fragile, Liesl has never been that, but because even iron will buckles when the dead knock politely and ask to be let in. By the time she woke, Port Charles had already split into camps. Some called it a miracle, the proof that love endures even when the morgue tags say otherwise. Others, schooled by Cassadines and con men, reached for more cynical words, imposter, double, chimera. The hospital lab ran DNA at a sprint, and the preliminary results sent whispers through the halls, markers match, mitochondrial lineage confirms maternal tie. Science curtsied to the impossible. Yet questions multiplied like bacteria in a petri dish left too close to the radiator. What about the bullet wound that ended his life? What about the autopsy that supposedly closed the book? If Nathan is truly Nathan, then the story of his death is a counterfeit. And if the death was counterfeit, who authored the lie? Anna Devane has spent a career moving across chessboards other people believed were dinner tables. She knows a signature when she sees one, and the flourish on this forgery felt sickeningly familiar. Caesar Faison was a master of resurrection, his own, other people's, and any myth that kept him ahead of the noose. Even a dead man can write in invisible ink if he leaves enough contingency plans tucked in safety deposit boxes under names no one can pronounce. So Anna returned to her old rituals, pin boards, red string, timelines annotated in cramped handwriting, a list of shell companies that bloomed overnight like mushrooms after rain, flights that landed at odd hours at small airfields, and a Vienna tailor whose ledger recorded a suit in Nathan's exact dimensions paid for in cash by a man whose shadow looked, in the grainy footage, like a ghost she refuses to honor with fear. Is Faison alive? Logic says no. Experience laughs at logic. The deeper Anna dug, the more the ground moved under her. Witnesses contradicted each other with the confidence of the truly deceived. A dock worker swore he'd helped unload a refrigerated crate marked medical supplies 3 nights before Nathan's reappearance. A waitress remembered a generous tipper with an accent she couldn't place. A burner phone pinged off towers that formed a breadcrumb trail leading nowhere or everywhere depending on which route you believed. Robert Scorpio urged caution. He has seen too many good people mistake velocity for progress, but Anna's resolve hardened. Liesl's face when she first saw her son had lodged in Anna's ribs like shrapnel. Truth mattered. It always had, even when it promised nothing but blood. The trap, when it came, looked like a lead. An encrypted drive left in a locker at the gym, old-school spycraft wrapped in a modern bow. The files inside referenced a facility tucked at the edge of the Adirondacks, a place with a legitimate front and a basement that wore its secrets like perfume. People go there to heal. People also go there to disappear. Anna ignored the brittleness in her bones and went alone, which is the first mistake every veteran makes when the past calls them by their first name. The second mistake is believing a borrowed key opens just one door. The third is trusting that the lights will stay on once you step inside. They didn't. The corridor went black, the kind of black that eats your bearings whole, and for a beat she recognized the thrill of danger she thought she'd aged out of. Then a hand grazed her shoulder, gentle, almost apologetic, and a voice she couldn't place said, "You're close." By the time her eyes adjusted, the corridor was empty and a camera in the corner blinked its sleepy red eye like a wink. Across town, Liesl gripped the present the way a drowning woman grips driftwood, so fiercely she left splinters in her palms. She made tea for a man who might be her son, listened to the cadence of his speech, catalogued the gestures that felt exactly right and the tiny deviations that felt exactly wrong. Trauma changes bodies. So does time. But a mother knows the grammar of a child's smile. Still, Liesl is not naive. Love has none of the legal protections of logic. She insisted on a full medical workup, scar maps, immunization titers, an old fracture in his wrist from a bike spill when he was 8 that only a family doctor would remember. Each answer unlocked another room inside the labyrinth. Each room contained a different version of hope, some as bright and poisonous as antifreeze. Port Charles had no space to process miracles at leisure because the Drew Kane investigation kept grinding forward like a snowplow in a late storm, slow, loud, throwing debris everywhere. Lines had already been drawn in permanent marker, allies, enemies, witnesses who didn't realize they were witnesses. The question was no longer whether someone would be arrested, it was who would be wrapped in the narrative at the moment the cameras were rolling. Evidence is an obedient servant with a fickle heart. It serves whoever gets to it first and speaks the most convincingly. The PCPD chased leads while prosecutors weighed optics, and somewhere in the middle of that tug-of-war, the city's patience frayed. Michael Corinthos stood at the edge of that fray with all the poise inherited from a lifetime of hard lessons. If you believe rumor, he wears target and shield in the same size. He knows how quickly a misunderstanding can calcify into an indictment and how long it takes to chisel truth back out. His supporters say he's innocent of anything beyond loyalty. His detractors point to the geometry of association and draw a straight line from that to intent. The prospect of prison is not theoretical for Michael. He has seen cells from the inside. He knows the way a door sounds when it shuts behind you and means it. If he goes in this time, it will be into a system that remembers his name and his bloodline with equal suspicion. There is a cruel calculus that crime writers like to pretend is chess when really it is roulette. Catastrophe for one man can be the alibi that saves another. If Michael were to land in a cell before the Drew case resolves, and if something devastating were to happen to Drew while Michael was there, an attack, a murder staged to look like something less overt, the initial wave of suspicion might recede from Michael long enough for other names to surface. The PCPD, forced to explain a death that occurred under their watch or in a facility they brief, would retriangulate. New theories would bloom. Old grudges would find fresh oxygen. Of course, that is the shape of a nightmare as much as it is any kind of strategy. No one of sound mind prays for a body to buy them time. Back in the hospital, Nathan's reappearance sent secondary shocks through people who had built their healing on the certainty of his absence. Maxie had mastered the art of forward motion, the choreography of getting out of bed for a kid who still needs breakfast even when your heart is a ruin. Seeing Nathan reopened a chapter she had shelved for survival. How do you welcome the past without evicting the present? The question wasn't abstract. It ate minutes off the clock and rearranged custody schedules and made civil conversations feel like tightrope walks strung over old wreckage. Some in town will romanticize the reunion. Others will count hidden costs the way accountants count pennies, patiently, relentlessly, until the ledger is honest. Anna's working hypothesis hardened under the weight of too many coincidences. If Faison didn't script this, someone who idolized his methodology did. The technique felt artisanal, too elegant to be opportunistic, too precise to be luck. The likely candidates narrowed to 3, a DVX splinter that survived in the cracks of history, a private syndicate with nostalgia for the villainy of yesteryear, or a lone acolyte hungry to impress a dead mentor. She sent quiet feelers through WSB channels that still answered her calls, and the replies she received were either scrubbed of specifics or trembling at the edges with fear. Institutions grow risk-averse when old ghosts stir. No one wants their name in a post-mortem. Then came the night Port Charles swapped rumor for spectacle. A fire alarm shrieked at the old foundry on Riverside, and by the time the first engine arrived, the building's windows wore the flicker of orange like eyes opening. On the 3rd floor, a room had been set as if for a séance, a table, 2 chairs, a metronome, and a photograph of Nathan with a corner charred. On the table, because symbolism is a language, sat a chess knight carved in bone. Anna recognized it. She had knocked an identical piece off a desk in Zurich during a raid years ago and didn't bother to pick it up because the man she'd cornered had swallowed a cyanide capsule and died smiling, which tends to reprioritize what you carry out. Whoever lit the foundry wanted her to remember that night. Whoever lit the foundry also wanted to prove they could lead her by the nose if she let them. Meanwhile the Drew case took an inevitable step. An arrest was made at dawn, The kind of arrest that looks good on a podium, a man with a mixed reputation, a motive you can explain in a sentence, and enough scraps of circumstantial evidence to stitch into a plausible garment. The press conference tasted like victory for exactly 3 hours. Then an affidavit surfaced that complicated the timeline, and a piece of surveillance from a parking garage refused to agree with the state's narrative. The story didn't collapse, but it sagged in the middle. The city braced for a round of second-guessing that would ask fewer questions about truth than about theater. Who benefits? Who leaks? Who writes the script we're all forced to perform? Liesl, who has weaponized guilt into forward motion before, made a decision that surprised even the people who think they know her best. She offered cooperation. Not the brittle kind that breaks at the first insult, but the durable kind made of love and terror and the knowledge that if she clings too tightly to the version of Nathan she wants, she will lose the man in front of her. She gave Anna access to memories she'd rather keep locked and to a paper trail that indicts parts of herself she pretends don't exist. It hurt. She did it anyway. Somewhere between vengeance and grace there is a narrow path called accountability. Liesl walked it barefoot. What comes next depends on which fuse burns faster. If Anna catches the puppeteer, the town will learn whether Faison's ghost still has hands. If the Drew investigation detonates first, collateral damage will spread in patterns that mirror old feuds, Corinthos against Cassadine-adjacent interests, Quartermain obligations bleeding into police budgets, the hospital trying to keep its halls clean while its people carry mud on their shoes. Michael's fate will turn on details so small they could fit under a fingernail, a text sent 5 minutes earlier, a camera that blinked when it should have watched, a friend who hesitates before using the word alibi. Nathan's fate will turn on a different set of details. A lullaby remembered, a scar a millimeter to the left, a story only a son would know to tell his mother when the night is too long and sleep refuses to cooperate. If history is a guide, Port Charles will not get tidy answers wrapped in bows. It will get choices. Anna can choose to follow the thread even when it saws at her fingers, or she can let it go and live with the itch of unfinished business. Liesl can choose to trust the evidence even when it threatens to rewrite the most painful chapter of her life, or she can refuse and watch the present sour. Michael can choose to brace for impact with the humility that disarms judges and enemies alike, or he can bare his teeth and dare the system to bite harder. The PCPD can choose to chase truth over headlines, or it can decorate the bulletin board with the wrong trophy and call the work done. And yet, amid the smoke and sirens, something stubborn remains, the belief that the truth, however brutal, is better than the rumor that flatters us. Nathan's return is either a miracle or a masterpiece of manipulation. Anna's hunt is either an exorcism or an invitation to let evil write one more chapter. The Drew investigation is either the moment justice remembers its job or another lesson in how easily power is distracted. Port Charles has survived worse. It will survive this. But survival is a low bar for a town that once believed in redemption with the fervor of a revival tent. The next 2 weeks will ask it to believe again, not in twists for their own sake, but in the possibility that facing a past we didn't choose is the only way to claim a future we can live with.